Hey guys, it's JFCMsnakes here, and today I will be doing a video on why snakes, or specifically royal pythons, won't eat. I've got a snake currently. I have about 900 gram male royal python that hasn't fed in about 4 months. But I know the reason for his not feeding, but I'm going to go through a few reasons why royal pythons won't eat. This isn't just royal pythons, this can also be for a lot of snakes in general. However, I only have experience with royal pythons not eating, so I don't really want to call it snakes not eating, because there might be a few variables that apply to other snakes but not royal pythons. So yeah, we'll get into the first one. And as you can see, I'm showing you my thermostat. One of the reasons that royals won't eat is because the temperature in the hot end isn't right. The temperature that you want to be aiming for is around 32 degrees Fahrenheit. I can show you right here. There, you can see it a bit, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And, or if you're from America, in Fahrenheit, that is about 92 degrees. Royals will tend to be happy with a hot area of about 95 as well, but that's, I'd say, the maximum, and the minimum I'd say it should be is about 88. If you notice your royal python stops eating, it could be because the temperature is either too high, aka going over 95 degrees Fahrenheit, or going below 88. So this also applies to the cold end. If it's too cold in the cold end, or too warm in the cold end, they may not eat as well. However, it usually applies to the warm end. Now we'll move on to the second reason. Okay, so now I'm showing you Arya, because the second reason that some royals won't feed, like Arya did here, is because they're settling into their new enclosures. Now when I got Arya, she didn't feed for the first 2 attempts, and that was over the span of about a week and a half, and that was mainly because she was just settling into a new enclosure. And so if you've only just bought a royal, and you've put it in its new enclosure, and you go to feed it for the first time and it doesn't feed, there's no reason to get worried. It's not ill. Well, it might not be ill, because sometimes they are ill as well, but in most cases it's not ill. It's just settling into its new enclosure, and it's not going to feed when it doesn't feel comfortable. So you need to let it settle in. But if you've left it a month and it's still not feeding, and you know that it's settled in, then that could be an indication that something has gone wrong and it's not feeling as comfortable as it should be. So now we'll move on to the next reason. Okay, so the next reason some royals might not eat may be because of illness. And illness can be due to a number of factors. The main illness in royal pythons is URI, which stands for upper respiratory infection, and that can usually mean that the snake has either got too high or not high enough humidity. Right, so the correct humidity for a royal python should be around 40 to 50 to 60. So anywhere in that gap, I recommend having it a bit higher, if I can get it to focus. There we go. At the moment in Coco's Viv it's about 45. However, I'd recommend it being around 50. These guys haven't been sprayed for about 2 or 3 days, so that's the main reason. So the main symptoms of URI is a mucus coming from the nose and mouth, and a wheezing. And if the animal has this illness, it will not eat. Now, I am not a vet. I don't know all the symptoms of illnesses in royal pythons. However, I know that a few symptoms to look out for that can show that your royal is unhealthy are things like staying on one side of the cage, so only staying on the cool side, only staying on the warm side, not feeding, stuff like obviously wheezing, which is an obvious sign. But yeah, stuff like that. Staying in one place is quite a big, not moving around, being quite sluggish and stuff like that. So if you ever see any of these symptoms, make sure you take it to a vet if it carries on for a long period of time. Another reason for royal pythons not feeding could be because it is breeding season. And typically when a royal is in breeding mode, they will go off feed. And as you can see, I'm showing you Lee's enclosure right now. and you can see he's not in it. This is because he was in breeding mode, and when this breeding mode should have ended in around March, April, like naturally. However, because I still have 2 female royals, even though they're not breeding age, they are still secreting pheromones, which he thinks they are. Because he doesn't know that they're not mature enough to breed, he still thinks that that's a breeding female near him, therefore extending his fast. So what I have currently done is I've moved him out of his 3-foot enclosure, and I've moved him back into a rub, and he's currently in another part of the house, away from the scent. But you may be asking the question, well, why doesn't it affect the females? Now, if my females were breeding age, and they were breeding weight, it would. However, they are not breeding weight, so they have no interest to breed at the moment, because they know that they're not mature enough to breed. So even though they can smell the male, they don't want to breed with him. I hope this makes sense, because but because Lee is breeding weight, he doesn't know that they're not breeding age. I'm finding it difficult to explain, but hopefully you're understanding it. Okay, so this next reason kind of ties in with the first one, and this is mainly about husbandry. A royal python will not usually eat if the husbandry isn't right. Therefore, if the enclosures are wrong size, so Coco, she's currently about 3 foot, well, she's about 2 foot 10 inches, something like that. Yeah, it's about 2 foot 10 inches, so she's not quite 3 foot yet, but this is her enclosure, and there she is. But in an enclosure, you want to make sure that you have 2 hides. This will help them feel more and more secure. So you want to make sure they have 2 hides. You want to ensure they have a big enough water bowl dish to soak in. That needs topping up a bit. And you also need to ensure that they feel comfortable. And the main issue with husbandry is the enclosure. Usually it's with the enclosures being too big for royals. Now royals naturally in the wild are quite shy animals. So this means that they'll constantly be down burrows in nice tight spaces. So if you go and put them in a huge 4-foot enclosure when they're only a foot long and only 1 hide in there, they will feel very insecure, and especially if they don't have a lot of cover like this, they probably won't eat. And so you need to ensure that your husband is right and your stuff like that. And that can be a main factor, and usually is the main factor to why many royals won't eat. Other reasons royal pythons won't feed can include them being stressed or disturbed prior to feeding. So if you go and handle your royal python for half an hour before feeding, and then you try to shove a rat in its face, it's probably not going to eat it, and if it does strike, it's most probably going to be a defensive strike. So that isn't what you want. So probably I'd recommend that on feeding day, I'd leave your snake about 2 or 3 hours before feeding for it to settle back down. And yeah, the next reason could be that they are not recognising food when it's being offered. So if you're offering a rat, and this rat has been left to thaw overnight, and you're putting it in its cage, and that rat has no temperature, which is the main way that they seek food, through heat, which are these heat pits right here. As you can see, see those little dents here? That is their heat seeking pits that they use to seek. So if your snake, or if your food item doesn't have any heat to it, it's not going to be able to recognise it. As well as if you're offering it a food item that it's never had before, say if it's been on its mice all its life, and then you try to switch it to a rat, it's probably not going to eat it. Some will eat it straight away, but because they've never had this before, they may not eat it. That could be a reason why they're not eating. The next reason could be that the snake is going into shed. And now anybody that's done their research should realise when their snake is going into shed. The common symptoms of this is that the snake will go very dull, its eyes will go blue, and it will get a pink belly in the days before it goes into the term blue. This is a picture of a snake in blue. So if your snake is like that, I wouldn't recommend not offering, because this guy in here always feeds when in blue. this guy always feeds when in blue, and so does this girl. The only one of my snakes that doesn't feed when in blue is Arya. So I will still offer, well, I will still offer, but I'll just defrost one less rat, to be honest. So usually I'll defrost 3 large wieners and a mouse. I won't defrost one anymore for him, but when she's in blue, I'll defrost 2 wieners and a mouse, and then I'll just offer her rat to her, and she might take it, but usually she won't, and then if she does take it, then I'll just defrost another rat. So yeah, if a snake is in shed, then it's not going to eat on most occasions. However, like I've said, a few of my snakes do eat when in shed. And the final, most mind-blowing theory that people don't realise when trying to feed their royals is that the snake could quite simply just not be hungry. In the wild, it's not unusual on the norm for these royals to go 6 or 7 weeks without feeding. Not because they're not hunting, but because sometimes food supply is quite low. And so when these royals in captivity are getting a rat every week of their girth, that can sometimes fill them up a bit. And especially if you're feeding once a week like I do. I know that there's been a few times I've just, not her, but Arya definitely, when I've just come to feed her, and even though she's been feeding every week, she's not in shed or anything like that, she still won't feed, and I've always put it down to the fact that she's simply not hungry. So, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been quite fun to make, to be honest. I've only realised during this video how many different reasons there are that a royal might not eat. And so I hope you've learnt something, and if your royal isn't feeding, be sure to leave your circumstances down in the description below, and I'll try and give my personal insight into what could be going wrong if you are still clueless. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, leave a like and subscribe, and it's been JFCMsnakes.